YouTube account. Oh, we're live apparently, but don't know where. So, um, ready, Charlie? We're here.
See if we are live. Okay, so this is our first shindig for Great Startups, which is our latest, newest, upcoming brand that we're working on. Um, so we're both heavy, I guess, in the startup world. That's what excites us, going from zero to hero. So it's only natural that we do something in the startup space. We're talking about it all the time over Zoom in private meetings. So now we're just going to do it in public for everybody to hear what type of banter goes on behind the scenes of Rocket Hub and 99 Robots and Affluence and all of our companies. And almost everything boils down to startups at the end of the day. We work with startups, we build startups, we think about startups, we sleep about startups. Everything is startup related. I've also noticed a pattern in that the majority of the things that we do lately and the majority of things we getting ourselves involved in are all startup related.
Right.
So that's a pretty good sign that this is a place that we should be in. We've never really done a podcast. We've never really done a live. We've never really done that type of content before. So we are both somewhat new to it. Actually, Andrea may be doing more of it lately than I have. But
But still very new. Like still very
yeah, still new. Yeah, I think we're still new. We would be considered rookies in this space, but you got to start somewhere. So consider this episode one, for lack of better words, of Great Startups. Um, in the future, we'd love to have other startup founders join us. That would be fun. I think it'd be good to grill other startup founders and hear their journeys of how they went from zero to hero. And then also what worked for them and what didn't. So I think that's the type of content that people like. That's the type of content I tend to consume as well. And given that I have not left my seat since 8 this morning, so that's 6 hours. In those 6 hours, I've only been talking to startup founders. So might as well just get them on the show and talk to them live so that other people can see the type of conversations we have and learn from it or at least get inspired by it.
right. I think. Well, actually, Charlie. First of all, this is Charlie, and I'm Andrea. I think we rewind a little bit for the people who
Yeah,
don't know us. I mean, I think it was like what 8 or 9 years ago that we met around this time,
yeah,
exactly for the reason of startups, right? Like it was like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you just
If I remember, I had at the time, I think the way the two of us got connected was I had at the time recently acquired a company called Triber, which was in the social media space, blogger space, and you were a user of Triber.
yeah,
And I had posted on Twitter that, hey, I'm going to be needing help. And you reached out within like a day or something. And it was like, here we are 8 years later, you know? And yeah, since then we've worked on probably a dozen businesses together.
yeah. Some things I
Power,
know that
power of the internet. Power of the internet.
yeah, people are so surprised because like you, I always look at you as a mentor, and the things that you've done definitely has made me better, see the world from a different non-marketer lens. But what one thing that I think we did have in common was the we were both curators of what was it, the Techstars newsletter before it was acquired, remember? uh, I think I lost your audio. Let's see.
No, it was definitely, yeah, that was one thing we had in common. I think you were running Techstars Digest
Right.
in Guam.
Yeah, yeah.
So all of Guam, okay. And
Mhm.
at that time, I was doing Techstars New Jersey for all the whole state of New Jersey. So a lot in common, actually. So not only were we Triber users, we were Techstars curators. That world has changed. So if we were smart, we would have been curators for ourselves back then. We would have a massive list by now, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I mean,
you
it's
know,
funny, even as Techstars evolved now to acquired by Google, it's this whole thing. And it's just testament to the fact that we always seem to start at the beginning of something great, which,
And great startups start as essentially just ideas, right? And
right.
so getting from nobody or zero to bad to good to great is a process.
Mm.
And I think you never really realize what you're working on, how it's going to contribute to that thing that will be your eventual success, or those things those will all be successes 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Um, but it all is a snowball effect. It all adds up. Um, I was having this conversation with someone where they made the comment, "Oh, I hate agency life." And I said to them, you know, you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't go through the agency journey, because you wouldn't be as smart as you are. You wouldn't know the right questions to ask. You wouldn't know how to unravel a client and understand how they make money. You wouldn't know, 20 different businesses inside out and how they make money, which really led to you understanding how to make money with your own business.
Right.
If you take that agency journey out of the equation, you'd still be trying to figure it out. And so everything, even the things that we sometimes feel suck, um, are still somewhat of an addition to who you're eventually going to be and the knowledge base that you have. So don't take it for granted. You may be in a sucky role, but that role is exactly what you need.
I mean, I think even the things that we've done over these past, like, what, 8 or 9 years, I don't even remember. Some people
Yeah.
remember the date, but that's not. But we haven't, like, not everything has been like a hit. Like some
Oh,
of these
no,
things
no.
were,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've thrown a lot of things on the wall. There was I was trying to remember who it was, but there was someone on Twitter, was an indie developer, indie hacker. He had posted his list of startups, and it was like crazy. It was like 40 something startups, and his success was really on the most recent, like two or three.
Right,
And that is pretty normal. That's what I've seen when I look across the people I know. Yeah, there were a few that had like, okay, hey, their first, startup or their first company was a good enough success that they could write, chalk it up on the board and say, yep, that was a win. But the majority of people I know had 5 to 10 different companies or different ventures or ideas that all failed miserably
right.
before they finally got to something that was, cash flowing, or something that they were like, okay, I'm going to bank on this for the next few years. And so if you don't actually launch, they'll never know. If you don't actually put it out in the world, you'll never know. So um, the enemy of startups is perfection,
Mm, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we're guilty of that ourselves, right? Is that there are many times we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on startups, only to never launch them. And, you
Yeah,
look back now and you're like, "I woulda launched that in a week." Now that I'm smarter, than I was back then, I woulda had that live in a week. But, we were dumb back then, and so you didn't know what you didn't know, and you didn't have these lessons, but now you're smarter, so you realize that perfection doesn't really matter. There are people out there that are winning with a mediocre product or service or info product or whatever you wanna call it, but they're winning because they're actually out there and you're not,
right. And
right?
listen, we remember all that time we spent prototyping Charber's Curate, and it was like
Mhm.
endless. You guys are dumb. You guys
Yep.
like figure
Yep,
this out. That's bullshit. But we spent so much time, and even today, it's still a great platform.
yep,
It's still a great feature. Um,
yep.
but I think, what would you say? There's the reality is that all these years later, we learned that what we did in the beginning was good enough.
Good enough, yeah, yeah, what we
Yeah,
did in the well, funny enough, the founder I was just talking to prior to this session, he was showing me his bookmarking tool that I was just mentioning earlier.
Hmm.
And I immediately thought to myself, this is try curate in a way. Only
Right.
yours are bookmarks, but where ours are, RSS feeds, Reddits, LinkedIn. And he's like, oh, we're bringing in Reddit and LinkedIn too. And I'm like, well, we did that 8 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And it's still live and it still works, you know. But meanwhile, so there's a cycle that what's old is new again,
Right. Right.
right? What's old is new again. And so you're seeing, like podcasting it's old, but it's new
Mhm.
again,
Right.
right? Even if you think about these tools like voice notes, no one used to leave voice notes, but now everything's a voice note.
Hmm.
Um, so um, I think people have realized that you can, if you have the distribution and if you have the right timing, you can pretty much launch anything and make some money.
What's really funny yesterday, Charlie, was that I heard that one of these platforms that we love just got a quarter of a million hits in the past month, and I was thinking about those resources that you've built over the years, right? And I went and I looked at Triber and I'm like, oh shit, 500,000 uh, in a little bit of time, and here we are sitting having launched the next offer, and the fact is that you have this huge like network, not of lists, but of assets, right? Can we talk a little bit about the harsh realities of building this moat, that you've built already? I think that's
Yeah.
ridiculously like that resource is crazy. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
most people don't realize like the depth and the width of those things that you have available, but how much time it took to build.
Yeah. We're looking at 15 years of building our moat, for lack of better words, or the portfolio. I think there was I'll give myself credit and I'll also give myself some critique. There was the smart side of me and then there was the dumb side of me. The smart side of me knew very early on that you needed to build a moat, and this concept of building assets, digital assets, was the equivalent of building real estate for someone on the physical side, right? And so you needed digital assets, but it wasn't just any type of digital asset. You needed to build digital assets that did two or three things. Number one, they gave you an audience. Number two, they were within a sphere that you knew a lot about. Um, and then number three, you can leverage one asset for the next asset and the next asset and the next asset. So that's where I think I got it right. Where I got it wrong was I didn't leverage them for each subsequent asset as quickly as I should have, and I didn't nurture them as much as I should have. Whereas if you look across a lot of the indie celebrities right now, the indie hackers and developers who are doing a really good job at building their micro communities, that's what they're doing really well.
Right.
Is they're vocal, they're out there, they're talking every day, they're emailing every day. Whereas I always had the opposite approach, which was my work will speak for itself, my assets will speak for themselves, which doesn't work in today's environment.
Economy, yeah.
That did work 20 years ago, but it doesn't work today.
Right.
And so today you have to be the face of each of these assets. So now you have a slightly different problem in that our problem isn't users or even user acquisition. We're actually pretty good at that.
Right.
Our problem is now how do you nurture those users to go um, across the entire ecosystem, across your entire portfolio, right? And we tend not to try to sell to people, which is a problem because had we, we'd probably be 100x bigger than we are right now. And so, some people they realize that very quickly and they realize, okay, hey, you should always be selling. We just never really had that as a first priority. And it was almost always at the bottom of the list. And no one's saying it should be your first priority to sell, but it definitely should be in the top of the list,
Uh,
right?
my funny
Mm.
conversation is always, "Hey, what do you say?" "Oh, nothing. I'm just here to serve." And you always tell me that's such a stupid answer, but
Yeah.
it really is how we
Yeah,
feel.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it is how I feel. I mean, most of the meetings I had today, I did
right.
not need to take, right? Like they were just people asking me for advice or whatnot. Um, but I wouldn't say no to them. I gave them my
Mhm.
Calendly, said book whatever you want, and we'll chat. And I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. And maybe I will if like I'm a billionaire or something. Maybe I'll value my time more. But I just don't think I would ever stop doing that. I enjoy that. I learned from it. So even though that person may think I got nothing out of it, um, maybe I did. Maybe I picked up a tidbit. Maybe I picked up some gem that I'll be able to reuse or repurpose in one of our assets. But building your digital assets is very key. In fact, you don't even know this, Andrea. I acquired a newsletter
Yeah.
about 6 months ago, 4 months ago. I don't even remember how
Oh,
long
I
ago.
know this already. You forgot you told
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. And it's called media assets. So it's actually called media assets. So speak of the devil here, talking about digital assets. So by digital assets, I guess we mean, SaaS companies, we mean digital products, WordPress plugins, info products, extensions, newsletters, Facebook groups, social profiles, you name it, those are all digital assets. They're all a way to reach an audience and make some money.
Yeah.
So about 4 months ago, I saw a newsletter that was for sale called Media Assets. And it basically just hit home for me because I was like, oh, this is my space. I know everything about this space. I've basically acquired every possible digital asset out there, from Instagram accounts to newsletters to whatnot. And about two, not two, 1.5 to 2 years ago, I also challenged myself to build out a newsletter network. And so as part of the newsletter network, I followed the same strategy of, our SaaS app development, which was I want to build out a network where each newsletter serves a slightly different niche. They don't necessarily need to be huge. They don't need to be 100,000 million person newsletters. In fact, sometimes the 5,000 person newsletter works better than the 50,000 person newsletter because they're so vested and interested in that niche. So slowly, what I did is I started building out a newsletter network and realized email is the name of the game because all these social platforms kind of own your accounts, own your reach. And we all started seeing that reach was diminishing over time on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere else. And tomorrow it could be gone. And so newsletters was like the new jam for me a year and a half ago. And so slowly I started acquiring or building newsletters in various areas. Media assets is a perfect example. The majority of people that subscribe to it are folks who run a newsletter or have a Facebook group or have some digital asset that they're using to either build an audience or generate revenue. So naturally, it extends pretty well to my other companies, Rocket Hub, 99 Robots, and all, everything else I do. So we've been, growing that, and that's been what I would call a very good investment. In other words, I expect that I will recover my purchase price within a year.
Right.
Anytime I can get my purchase price back within a year, that's a great investment, right? So if you take it to the outside world, to the physical world, if you buy a piece of real estate and you can get your money back within a year, people would say that's a steal.
Crazy, right?
Yeah,
That's
that's
like,
crazy.
so
Like,
what am I
normally real
getting?
estate's going to take 7, 15 years, right, to
Right,
get your purchase price back. In the digital world, you can actually get your purchase price back in 1 to 2 years.
right,
You just got to know how to do it, obviously, but you have to know how to grow things and how to maintain things. But at the same time, you actually just have to know the numbers. What's it worth? Because
right.
what I've noticed is a lot of people don't value digital assets the way they value a physical asset.
Mhm.
and I do. So I'll look at a digital asset and say, yes, I'm putting down $10,000 or $5,000 or $20,000 or $100,000, whatever, for this asset. But if it's bringing me in a few $1,000s per month or a few $100s a month, just play that out and I can see that I recoup my purchase price very quickly. And thereafter, it's all profit with
Right.
very minimal overhead. And digital assets typically have minimal overhead. Running a newsletter isn't rocket science, right? It's also not something you need to do daily unless it's a daily newsletter.
Right.
Running a Facebook group, after a while, after you've hit certain thousands of followers or members or whatever you want to call it, the members themselves provide a lot of the user generated content. So the workload actually decreases as you get bigger,
Mhm.
but the money you make increases as you get bigger. So that's like the sweet spot. It's like, oh, I'm going to do less work over time and make more money. This is great. So
Right.
I love digital assets for that purpose. But I know this conversation is not about digital assets. But when I look across my portfolio, it's SaaS companies, it's WordPress plugins, it's digital assets, newsletters, Facebook groups.
Mhm.
And I'm the key now is to try to bring all of that together, scale those so that no matter what we launch, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, we have an audience, a built-in audience to sell to.
Right. I mean, so here's the thing though. I don't think, and we talked about this before when we talked about unique leverage. Like, what do startups say when they're going to launch the next like help desk or whatever it is, bookmarking app, and you ask like, what makes you different? What is the USP? What's the differentiator? What makes you the team or that platform that should be doing it and that people should care about? And we always get the common answers when that question is asked, right? Oh, we got great customer support, which is the emptiest, right? And what else? What else do they say? Our
UI.
technology is the
We care
best.
about design. We care about our customers. It's like, yeah, those are bullshit
UX,
answers.
yeah,
Yeah, those are definitely bullshit answers. So this goes back to two things. Number one is choosing the right product
right,
to build or the right service. So if you could be a startup that's providing a service, and you can be a startup that's building a product. And so choosing the product, you definitely have to be thinking about what's my unfair advantage, where do I have some leverage that others don't. And then with regard to the actual service or product, within that is another layer of, okay, what are my unique differentiators?
right,
So there are unfair advantages in identifying the right product you should be working on, which if I look across the thousands by now of startups that or founders, prospective founders, entrepreneurs that I've talked to, I would say the majority are already choosing the wrong product. So they're destined for failure.
right, yeah,
If I had to put a number on it, I'd probably say that number is close to 80%. So if 80% of the folks are choosing the wrong product to start, the problem with that is, yeah, you'll learn something, but you're wasting time.
time,
And
right,
time is your enemy.
yeah,
In any of these things, service or product, time is your enemy. Your biggest competitor is time, and then everyone else that's doing what you're doing. But time is the one that's going to hurt you the most. You don't want to waste time. And most people choose a product where they're starting at zero. When you talk to them, you realize they have some gifts, they have some skills that you're like, why aren't you working on that? Why aren't you leveraging that? And they don't really view it that way. They don't view that as an unfair advantage. So when someone says to you, hey, what's your unfair advantage? You're looking for something that's measurable, that makes it more difficult for the next person to catch up to you,
right,
right? And so, let's take you for example.
okay,
If you have an unfair advantage. What would you say your unfair advantage is?
My unfair advantage is that I like people. That's my
Okay.
unfair advantage.
Okay. You like people. All right. So if you came to me with a service or product that literally had no people involved, like you didn't have to talk to people, I'd say, I'd come back to you and say, well,
Yeah,
how are you taking advantage of your best skill set here? And you wouldn't be, right? You wouldn't be. So,
right.
these are like very simple concepts, but people don't think about it that way. So I think you've come to me with at least 50 ideas, and I've shot most of them down and I said, this is a terrible idea. Don't work on this.
Yeah,
And in many cases, it's because it does not align with your personality. It does not align with your unfair advantages. It does not align with your skill set. You'd literally be starting at a negative space
hmm,
to try to win a game you can't win. Right now,
right.
someone would make the argument, well, Charlie, well, no, they could still make money and this and that. Yeah, that's great, but we're trying to win here.
Why just make
Uh,
money?
we're,
Yeah,
yeah,
we want to
yeah,
make.
we're trying to get a notch on the belt, right? And
Hmm,
so in everybody's life, if you think about notches on the belt, everybody's going to measure it differently. A person in Bangladesh is going to measure his notches on the belt, his or her notches on the belt differently than a person in America or Russia or anywhere else. So let's put that aside because we can argue that to death, right? Is what is success? The point being is that you're only going to have a certain number of notches on your belt throughout your career. It's not even your lifetime; it's your career throughout your
right.
working career. And so, what is that on average? 30 years is your career. Let's be honest. It's going to be 30 years.
Yeah,
Some people will work 40 years, but I mean, come on, really at 65, are you chasing notches on your belt? Not really. You're chasing Social Security at that point.
yeah,
So I think it's 30 years. I
yeah,
think most people are going to work 30 years. After that, you're done. Even if you're still working, you're not really aggressively pursuing some dream. Okay.
right.
So you got 30 years to get some notches on your belt. In those 30 years, if you can shave time to try to get a notch on your belt, you absolutely should. Hence, time is your enemy. So, how do you shave time? You shave time by focusing on your unfair advantages. And so, for some people, their unfair advantages could be something that they inherited. It could be legacy driven, it could be mom and dad. Have gotten them into some type of business and they've been in that business for 40 years. That's an unfair advantage. You should absolutely take advantage of that. I wish I had that. Like you should
Right.
absolutely take advantage of that. I cringe every time I hear someone say, "Oh, well, I don't want to get into that because that's my mom and dad's." It's like, what? You don't want to
Yeah,
get
like
into something that they spent 20, 30 years building? Like makes no sense
that's
to
your
me.
leg up, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's your leg up. Like you have an unfair advantage that others don't. 20 years of brand building, 20 years of customer lists. Like, what are you thinking? Infrastructure in place. Absolutely take advantage of it. Someone else will say, "Oh, I know how to code, but I don't want to do that anymore." Okay, I can understand that, but if you're good at it, can you not, combine 2 skill sets and get a leg up on the next guy? Yeah, absolutely. If you're good with people, could you not do something that, allows you to put yourself in front of those people and more of those people? Again, leverage time, to your advantage. So I think this is where people just, happen to allow time to take its course before they start directing their own course. And in many cases, it just takes a trigger to realize that you could do something.
mm,
So that trigger is sometimes very small. For example, my first company wasn't something that I manifested. It was a time and circumstance scenario. I saw an opportunity, a door opened, and I took it. Right?
right,
That translated into a multi-million dollar business.
right.
That's nice when you're 24 years old. Okay, that's a nice thing to have. First notch on the belt. Okay, move on to the next thing. Completely different space. Failed miserably. Okay, lost all my money. Okay, you take it in strides and you move on to the next one. So you're constantly doing something to trigger a notch on the belt. That's how I view this. And when you talk to most people and you listen to their ideas don't sound like a trigger. Their ideas sound like something they just need to fill some time with.
Right.
And
The
that
zombie.
worries me. Yeah, that worries me because you could tell by what they're saying, how they're saying it, how much research they've done in the space. You could tell that you're trying to fill time, hoping that becomes something substantial, as opposed to, hey, I found something, I'm going to work my ass off to make it something substantial.
Right.
And I think when you've done this enough times, and enough doesn't mean 50 times, enough means two or three times. When
Right.
you see that sequence, when you see that pattern, you start realizing that you could pretty much do anything you want. It's just all a matter of putting the right pieces together in the right order.
Mhm.
And
Oh, that's oh, hold on. Back up because you were about to jump over something and just kind of cover it up, but you said in the right order. Doing that's
yeah,
very important.
yeah, no, it is. And I think that's one of those things that probably scares most people is
Mhm.
they're not structured. When you hear their thoughts, when you hear them talk, when you hear their plan, it's not a sequential plan. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's, they're throwing stuff on the wall even when they know what they want to build. And I think, having things visible in your head, some clarity as to this is the order that things need to be done for me to see results. Yes, that comes with time, but that's also why you need those few notches on the belt, because once you have them, almost everything is transferable. So whether you started a meatpacking business, or you did drop shipping and ecom, or you ran a SaaS, or you ran an agency, there's a certain order in which you do things that becomes natural over time, right? And I think the people who win a lot, that becomes so natural to them that they look at a project and they say, I know how I'd grow this, right? Whereas the people that have not done it before, or maybe they haven't had enough motions already, they look at it and say, I have no clue where to start. And I have no clue what step two is, and I have no clue what step three is. So I'm kind of lost. I'm just winging it. And we're all winging it to a certain extent. Let's be honest. We're all winging it to a certain extent. But I think some structure is necessary. And that structure does come with seeing things others don't, right? Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. And that does come with having visibility into things others don't, having access to people that others don't, having access to resources that others don't. So the more pockets you can get yourself into, the more knowledgeable you become, the more confident you become in what's the right sequence. I should be doing this. And many times, just working with the right people is enough.
Yeah.
Just watch someone else do it,
Yeah,
right?
you constantly show me that. That's one of, I will say, I think actually, apart from the liking of people, is that my huge leverage is that I've been able to sit and watch you do a lot of things, help you in some things, and not in others, but just see you actually execute them, and see several other people do that at scale too. But what I love about what you just said here is that uh, we don't all have it figured out, right? Like there's no bible of the things you should do or blueprint of what you need to be doing, but there definitely is a structure, right? There, and here's the other thing too, like I've been so blessed, anointed to be able to like come to you when I have this thought process, right? And I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? To a point where I say, Charlie, can you you're like, just come and give me your ideas and I'll tell you if you should do it or not, right? And that is the mentorship that like I am so grateful for. I think a lot of people don't have that, right? What
Yep.
does it take? I mean, this is the reality, right? Everyone starts from somewhere. And whether you basically you've been acquired before, and you're building this completely new thing, you still need a mentor for that, right? Or whether you're in college and you're trying to figure it out. Like, um, how did you get your first mentor? I guess I would say, and what would you recommend if people are looking for, they want to build their startup and they need that guidance? How do they get it?
I think we no longer live in a world where you can have these excuses.
Mm,
Um, and the reason I say that, and maybe it's a little harsh, but I firmly believe it. You can no longer have excuses that you did 20 years ago when I got out of college, or 24 years ago when I got out of college. Back then, you could have used things like, well, where I'm from, we don't have X or we don't have this. You could have used, oh, well, I didn't go to school for that
Right.
as an excuse. You no longer can do that. Why? Well, we have the internet, and really that's about all you need. As long as you have the internet, you pretty much have the same access as most people. You may not have a mommy and daddy money. I don't, but that's okay. You don't need it. But you do have the internet, and you can get access to anybody that you want. So here's a few examples of that. Actually, the call I just had before this was a very savvy founder. This is probably his fifth business, and he's had some successful moments. And so he doesn't need me. Okay,
Mhm.
he's a smart guy from Israel. Yet, even though he doesn't need me, he asked if he could get an hour of my time, and I said, "Yeah, of course. Here's my calendar." So when you think about that, wait a minute. Here's a guy that's 5 times successful. He's part of the leading accelerators, Y Combinator, Techstars, all of that. He's got several businesses that make money on the side. So he's got multiple channels of income. Yet he still took the time out to ask if I'd be willing to meet with him so he could bounce some ideas off of me, just because I happen to be in the same space as him.
Right.
We're not competitors, even though we are. There's no competitive aspect to that conversation. I'm an open book. I revealed everything, and likewise, he told me a bunch of things as well that I thought were interesting. Um, we have never met in person. We have only had one conversation over Zoom prior to that.
Right.
So, so all he did was ask. That's all it took. Um, Similarly, anybody anywhere could do that and get themselves access to a person that can help them. But if you don't open your mouth, you don't get it.
Yeah. Closed
So
mouth
rule number
doesn't get
one, say something,
fed.
right? Rule number one, say something.
Yeah.
Now there's the give and take side of this, right? Which is you can't only take.
Right.
So people aren't really going to be willing to help you if all you want is their time, which is precious, but you're not willing to give yours. So, what was the flip on this conversation I just had prior to this meeting? Was he offered at the end to say, "Hey, is there anything I can do for you?"
Hmm.
And while I didn't have anything on the top of my mind, I told him, "Hey, if you know any other startups, please send them my way." And he said, "I do." And so there's the give and take right
Right.
there. Um, Same thing with learning. If you don't know something, yeah, 20 years ago, you're SOL, all right? But today, I would say the best learning is available right on the internet, on YouTube and on forums and Facebook groups and info products and courses for $27. I mean, come on, I don't care where you are. You can afford $27 to learn how to build a business. You
Right.
don't need $27,000 a semester like you do with a traditional college. So
Mhm.
I put very little value on education, on the traditional educational system, being your channel for entry, being your badge of entry to anything nowadays. In fact, I'd almost argue that because I speak to so many college students, and I used to speak to a lot of college students even before,
Mhm.
um, I could see that yeah, going through college and learning that, learning through the in-person training is fine and whatnot. But I could see that they were all basically using the internet as their actual training ground. And
Right.
the thing is, when you're young, you basically have zero risk. You
Yeah.
could fail miserably, no one cares,
Right.
right? When you're older and have 3 kids and you
The
got
wife.
wife and you got insurance and this and that to worry about, you're
Mhm.
going to be risk averse, right? You're going to be far more conservative. But when you're in your 20s and you're 18 or whatever, you can do what the heck you want. And if you're not, I kind of view that as, well, then you just don't want it bad enough,
Right.
right? Because the stars are already aligned for you. You have access to the internet, you have access to people, and you have no risk,
Mhm.
right?
What
So
else do you need? What other opportunity
yeah,
do
exactly. Like, if you want to be a loser, but really all it takes is to go do something. Like get off
Right.
your ass and actually go do something. Go do the research, go figure out who's who, what's what, and start working. None of this is going to come easy.
Mhm.
People like to people I if there's one gripe I have is how easy certain people try to make it seem,
Right. The
right?
romanticism behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they glorify the startups that raised $100 million in a year or became unicorns, and like that's not normal. That's not
Right.
what's going on in the real world. In the real world, the hustlers are hustling
Mhm.
and they're working every minute that you're not. All right.
Right.
And those are the people that are going to win. Those are the people that are going to have, three, four, five businesses by the time they're 30 or 35. Those are
Right.
the people that are going to see a lot of things you can't see because they're they're open to it. They're experiencing it. If I come across 99 problems, even though I may not have the solutions to them, the fact that I came across them, I have some semblance of when it happens, how it happens, who should be involved. I've done the research on that problem. I may still not have the solution.
Right.
I'm far ahead of you.
Mhm.
I've seen something, I've experienced something that you haven't. And if I experience 99 things that you haven't, I'll always beat you
Right.
because uh, they're no longer show-stopping problems to me. They're just a problem I need a solution to. That's it. They're just
Right.
another hurdle. And I
And
think
it's
most people put too many problems in front of them that they just can't cross. They can't, really like jump that hurdle. And then they give up and they move on to the next thing.
yeah, like problems that don't exist. And so yeah, we talk about that a lot. Oh, does it exist yet? Are you talking about a problem that's real? Is it real?
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Like I want
Is it?
problems. In fact,
Yeah.
my day is problems. Like 8 hours a
Right.
day, it's problems. And some people look at it. I had a guy sit next to me the other day, and he was listening to me 8 hours. He's sitting next to me, and he's like, "I wouldn't want your job." And I said, "Yeah, then you can't be an entrepreneur." Right.
Yeah.
But I asked him, why do you say that? He goes, all I heard was problems.
Yeah.
And all I heard was people asking you for the solution.
Fix my problem. And
Fix my
the fact
problem.
is, you're the last person who knows how the hell to fix that API call.
Yep.
Should know it, right?
Hmm.
the,
Yep. Exactly. It's like I
yeah.
don't know the answers to these problems,
Hmm.
but it goes back to that whole concept of order and sequence and structure and how you process problems, right? And I guess over 24 years, you start figuring out that every problem there's a structure in how to solve it. And sometimes the solution isn't the best solution, but it at least helps you move past the hurdle so you can experience the next problem.
Right. Yeah. Most of the time we're on a problem G and H when A and B
Mhm.
hasn't been solved. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's really interesting this concept here because as we're moving into a different place, right? The changing times of a startup, right?
Mhm.
Before it was like let's raise a and this is something that I think you've mastered very well over the past few years, especially. Like before, it was like let's raise a round of funding, right? That's how you start up, right? And but ever since I've met you, it's always been like, let's prove this concept actually is worth something. And that whole bootstrap mentality. And I think that is what's going to work now. I mean, let's just put it out there. Times are changing. AI is definitely disrupting our space in general, and the world at large, right? So we're seeing all these, I mean, we've been seeing it for like a year and a half already. All these companies basically consolidating, optimizing their workforce. And then we have the front line, which is the people closest to technology. We're building the tech to cancel or get rid of our jobs, essentially. Um, so what used to be what a 20-person team can now be a two-man team, a two-man
Pretty
woman
much.
team,
Yeah.
right? And so that I personally think, and I just wonder what you think about this. Um, there was a comfort level in the Silicon areas, right? Where you just get around to funding, you never prove revenue, like you never proved that model out. You basically just got free money from people's hopes and dreams, and then your company dies in 3 to 5 years, right? Um, what There's an opportunity for people who are like us, right? Who are, but
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. So here's the analogy I'll use because I'm a gambler. Um, so the, no, it's not that one path is wrong or right. I think wouldn't it be nice to have the secret sauce, to be
right,
able to press a button and build a revenue generating company, right? Like, so imagine you could literally come up with an idea today and by, next week have the first dollars in the door.
mhm,
So when I paint that picture, I say to myself, okay, that's what I want, is I want the ability to generate revenue on demand. And I should be able to cross industries so that if the market goes one way or another, left or right, zig or zag, I'm still going to win
right,
because of my ability to generate revenue. And um, in that sense, it goes back to like, okay, identifying what you're building, the product or the service. So no different than someone who says, well, I can pick stocks really well, right? No different than Silicon Valley saying I can pick startups really well. Okay.
right,
But how do you win? You don't win by picking a few stocks that are doing okay over time. You win by picking a few stocks where one or two of them are going to be wild successes. They're the ones that are going to carry you. If you look at most people's portfolio, and I've had the privilege of looking at some really successful people's portfolio, the stocks they picked that made them multimillionaires, decamillionaires, or whatever you want to call them, usually were two or three stocks
right,
out of 20 or 30. So what happened to the other, 17 or 27 stocks? I mean, some were winners, some were losers, but not really like true winners. They grew over time as they should. And some lost over time as they should. Some companies went bankrupt, but two or three became the stocks that essentially catapulted and 10x everything.
right,
And so Silicon Valley plays the same game. And they'll say, all right, we're going to pick these 100 startups, of which we know we're going to lose money on 90 of these. They're going to be unsuccessful. Just like we know most startups are going to fail. 90% of the startups are going to fail. Silicon Valley knows the same metric. But they also know that I need about two or three of these to become huge, become unicorns. And if that happens, who cares about the 95, 97 others? They can be a wash. We don't care.
right,
We're taking an opposite approach to this in that we're saying, hey, I don't want to gamble with my startups, right? I do know that some are not going to succeed or will experience the wrath of market dynamics. Okay. And you won't be able to control their destiny. I do know that some will make money and I do know that some will be wildly successful. Okay. But I'm trying to increase the likelihood of success. And the only way I can increase the likelihood of success is if I keep getting myself into startups where I have built in success. I have that unfair advantage. I have the built-in audience. I already own the audience, right? And I already know I can sell. I can make
mm,
money. So, piggybacking on what you just said, in that, yeah, we tend to have more of a bootstrapper approach, but I think in throwing a lot of stuff on the wall over the last 20 years, we figured out what works and what doesn't. Are we going to be wrong sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. We're still going to be wrong sometimes, but I think we're going to be right more often than not.
right,
And now we're realizing what we should get ourselves into and what we shouldn't. And even though the team may change, even though the times may change, the markets may change, I think what happens is we've gotten smarter, smart enough at least to know that this type of business isn't going anywhere and this type of business has a short life.
Right.
So if it has a short life, let's move quickly and get it out of our portfolio, and let's focus our energy over here.
Right.
And also, moods and whims may change. You may be really, really passionate about something 5 years ago, but you're no longer passionate about it anymore. You don't want anything to do with it. So all those factors are going to be at play. But if I was doing this all over again as a solopreneur or whatnot, I think my thesis would still be the same. I would build an audience, try to build within one sector, one segment, one space, but build multiple products and services or whatnot within that space so that I can constantly be reintroducing new and new and new. It's no different than what we see a lot of these coaches and course creators do who we run ads for, right?
Right.
They're building a low ticket, mid ticket, and high ticket item to sell. But once they're done with that, they have to come up with something new to
Right.
sell to the same audience. So then they have to reinvent themselves and come up with something new that that same audience needs. And somehow they're still around 5, 10 years later, selling to the same audience who has bought every single product they've ever launched. We're only doing that in the digital asset space, if you think about it.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing.
Right. I mean, and here a lot of founders are going to face that problem moving forward is that I have 20 things I'm doing. How do I be the face of all these 20 things? And we've had this conversation before. It's like, how do we like bridge the gap so that there's your face on it? But it makes sense, right? And that's a big problem to solve, especially now that the face is important, right? The face
Yeah.
behind the brand
Yeah.
anyway. But
Yep. Now I think we this was almost 10 years ago. I was at a meetup. Yeah, 10 years ago I was at a meetup, and a professor of marketing, called me out in the crowd and said, "Hey, Charlie, what do you think about this?" And I remember telling him that this marketing in general is going to shift radically into the individual and not to the corporation.
right.
And I guess it has. So I feel good at that. At least I saw it back then. I feel bad that I didn't execute on it and create my personal brand. So I was wrong in not doing that and actually taking my own advice. But I kind of saw the writing on the wall even 10 years ago in that the individual is going to be the new um, product, the new
Right.
marketer. And by the individual, what we mean is you, me, the end user. They're going to be the marketer, and it's going to be up to the brand to convince the end user uh, to promote their brand,
Right.
as opposed to the brand running, an ad on a billboard or on TV or whatever. They're really going to go to the Andreas and the Charlies and the Joes and the Jills and say, "You promote my product."
Hmm.
And so we listen to individuals, and so it's kind of come full circle in that no one believes, and we're pretty much all numb to an ad nowadays.
Right.
Right? We see
Right.
an ad on a site, like we know how to skip over it. We know it's an ad. We haven't even like looked at the graphic. We haven't even looked at the creative or the copy, and we know it's an ad.
Right.
So we're already programmed as a generation to realize what an ad looks like. But then, our acquaintance may promote a product and we'll listen to the whole 10-minute spiel about that product. And we'll
Yeah.
believe it and we'll buy it.
Right.
And so the individual is now the extension of the brand. And so naturally, whether you're a solopreneur or you're a huge corporation, you have no choice but to have individuals promote you.
Right.
And so you need as many people, going rah, rah, rah about your product as you can get. And the first person that needs to be that is you,
It's you. Yeah.
is you, right? And so, um, by the way, that is also where the name is you comes from.
It's you. Oh yeah.
If you're
Listen,
wondering.
Yeah, you everyone who's watching, you just don't know how long I've been begging Charlie to be a personal brand. You, it's been at least 5 years, right? For half a decade,
Least,
so
yeah.
at least, yeah. And I'm glad we're finally doing it. We're out here. I think we know enough to. I mean, definitely you know enough to say, hey, listen, like jump on the bandwagon.
No, no, at this point, I think anyone who's behind a company who doesn't want to put him or herself out there is making a grave mistake, well, as I have. So I'm the first culprit. But I'm going to try not to do that anymore.
Right, right.
And
And so as we close out, because we're nearly at the hour mark, I do want to do a recap. This is Great Startups, right? And this is Charlie. I'm Andrea. But Charlie has a bunch of companies that he should talk about. And I'm going to push him to talk about that on our first episode so that everyone knows where he's coming from. And then we go from there. And so, Charlie, now is time to talk about yourself.
talk about myself. Yeah,
Yes,
see, I'm not good at this because this is not what
I
I
know.
do.
I know.
But I guess we're gonna have to do it. All right. Let's see where to begin. So I have my hands in a lot of things. I'm literally the epitome of a serial entrepreneur. So you can put my face next to that. Um, let's see where to begin. So on the service side and the agency side, we're really heavy. We've been in that space for a decade plus, I guess, at this point. I run a company, an agency called 99 Robots that does marketing, advertising, web design, and development. Pretty well known in New Jersey and the WordPress space, actually, as well. Um, Andrea and I run another agency called Amfluence, which is in the social media growth services space. And so we initially started on Instagram and TikTok, and now we're shifting to LinkedIn and other spaces as well. Um, and then we run two other productized microservices called Ad Angles and Lead Bites. Ad Angles basically does ads as a service. Lead Bites does leads or list building or cold email marketing as a service. And so if you look at those services as a whole, you'll realize that they probably tackle 4 to 5 or 6 of these digital marketing channels in the digital marketing wheel. So they're all spokes of the wheel. We'll probably need to tackle a few more spokes to really complete that wheel, but there's rhyme and reason as to why did we launch them, why do we have them in our portfolio, because they naturally help all of our other companies in some shape or form while also helping clients. So that extends pretty well into our SaaS product portfolio as well. So on the SaaS side, we own some pretty respectable names, such as podcasts.com, which is a podcast hosting service and now essentially a search engine. So Google for podcasts is what we're becoming. We own Triber.com, which is a well-known name in the social media scheduling and blogger amplification space. So we help bloggers get more shares of their content. Um, we recently launched another app called SEO Pilot, which is a um, SEO focused AI writer. So think, something similar to Koala or Machined or Jasper, things like that, but really focused on long form article writing. We have another product called Leadinary, which helps you generate leads for local businesses. So if you're a service provider selling to local businesses, you can use Leadinary to identify them through Google Maps business listings, and then perform outreach to those local businesses. Um, we have another business called Pitch Response to help get free press or PR, links for your site. So that is a company we acquired recently. Essentially a PR solution that we can use not only for our own companies but for our clients. And then we have Izu, which is a UGC creator platform, an influencer marketing platform, where we have 4,000 creators on our platform who are ready and willing to create UGC videos for brands. And so we have a few more in the portfolio, such as DraftPress, which is a WordPress plugin shop, essentially. We have 40 WordPress plugins in our portfolio, 20 which are open source, 20 which are paid plugins. So we're probably one of the biggest plugin shops out there. I mean, I'm sure there's probably 100 more, but definitely one of the biggest out there. We know our WordPress stuff. And then lastly, if you combine the marketing side of this, you combine the SaaS app development, the WordPress plugin development, we run a company called Rocket Hub. And Rocket Hub basically helps early stage startups get their first users, get their first cash injection, get their first reviews and feedback for their product. So we run lifetime deals for early stage SaaS startups and WordPress plugins. Combine all of that, and you start realizing that we love startups. And naturally, what we're building now is a centralized home for what constitutes a great startup. How do you get from good to great? And so we'll be talking a lot about that and are building that out, and we will help you get that traction that you need through visibility through our site, through amplification through our various channels, and then of course giving you ways to have a directory listing, get courses and content related to how to grow your startup. And then, of course, Andrea, me, and the team will be talking about the journey throughout. So that's everything in a nutshell. There you go.
We had a little bit of, our remote location and the fiber that occurs with the internet. I think we're at the perfect marker here to say, okay, everyone, we want to thank you for joining us. It's really we've been here for an hour. It felt like a few minutes because we're just talking about stuff we always talk about, which I think is pretty awesome. And, by the way, there's about 50 things on Charlie's list that he didn't mention that just didn't stick or hasn't hit yet, but I'm sure they'll emerge as the years and the time passes. So thank you everyone for being with us. We'll be back here again next week for another episode of Great Startups. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, share it because sharing is caring. And that's what we're here for. So, all right, Charlie, I'm going to end the stream and then we'll be back again next week to do the same thing. Just talk about great startups.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, I think we